If you died tomorrow, no one would miss you, my father said at my promotion dinner while everyone laughed. So I disappeared, and they went crazy when there was no one left to pay their bills. Sup Reddit. Grab your snacks and get ready for the mess you're about to hear. I'm Chase, 31 male, work as an electrician, and until 6 months ago, I was what my family called their financial backbone. Not because I asked for the job, but because I was dumb enough to think helping family meant something more than being their personal credit line. Here's how messed up my family dynamic was. Dad runs a construction business that's been temporarily struggling since Obama's first term. He's sharp as heck when it comes to manipulating people. Knows exactly how to frame every request for money, like he's doing me a favor by letting me invest in the family business. Real smooth operator when he wants something. Mom works part-time at a dental office, 20 hours a week max, and spends the rest of her time perfecting the art of emotional manipulation. She's got this system down to a science. Plant the seed of guilt, water it with tears, then harvest my bank account when I'm feeling like garbage about being an ungrateful son. Never asks directly, just mentions how stressed she is about bills, then sighs dramatically until I offer to help. Then there's my sister Rebecca, 27 years old, changes jobs like most people change their underwear, and has turned being a professional victim into an Olympic sport. Don't mistake her for some helpless case. This chick could sell ice to Eskimos when she wants money. She's mastered the art of crisis creation, always has some emergency that's simultaneously urgent enough to require immediate financial assistance, but never quite serious enough to learn from. I became their ATM gradually. Started innocent enough, Dad's truck died, needed $3,200 for repairs. Just this once, son. Got this big contract starting next month. Except he didn't have a contract. He had a lead that fell through, but by then I'd already paid and he'd moved on to the next sob story. 7 years of this nonsense. 7 years of being treated like a walking credit card with no interest rate and unlimited forgiveness. I kept receipts for everything. Every Venmo transfer, every wire, every time I saved their asses from eviction or repossession. All logged and categorized like evidence for a case I never thought I'd need. The wake-up call came at my promotion dinner. I'd just gotten bumped to electrical supervisor, leading a crew of 8 guys, $15,000 raise, company truck, the whole nine. My best friend Peter suggested celebrating at some high-end steakhouse, but my parents insisted on hosting at their place. Family celebration, they said. More intimate. Should have known it was an ambush. The dinner was peak family dysfunction. Mom spent 20 minutes gushing over Rebecca's new highlights, $200 worth of salon work while she was supposedly too broke. Rebecca sat there scrolling through Instagram, completely ignoring her 8-year-old son who was running around destroying their living room. Dad made his usual passive-aggressive comments about how I work too much and need to find a woman willing to deal with someone who's married to his job. Rebecca rolled in an hour late with some nonsense story about traffic. She'd obviously been pre-gaming somewhere, had that slightly glassy-eyed look of someone who'd had just one drink that turned into 4. When they wheeled out the grocery store sheet cake, Dad stood up with his drink like he was about to deliver the State of the Union. To Chase, he announced, raising his drink. Our family's cleanup crew. The guy who never lets us down, no matter what kind of mess we manage to step in. Light chuckles around the table. I should have seen what was coming. Heck, Dad continued, grinning like he'd just thought of something absolutely hilarious. If you died tomorrow, no one would miss you. We'd just panic about who's going to fix our problems and pay our bills. The room exploded. Rebecca actually snorted soda through her nose. She was laughing so hard. Mom giggled and nodded. My nephew asked what his grandpa meant, and Rebecca told him, Uncle Chase is our personal bank, sweetie. I sat there holding my fork, watching these people I'd spent $67,000 supporting over the years laugh at the idea that my only value was financial. The promotion celebration, my achievement, my success, my moment, had somehow become a roast where the punchline was that I was nothing more than a human ATM with legs. I excused myself to use their bathroom and stood there staring at my reflection in the mirror. When I came back 5 minutes later, they'd already moved on to discussing Rebecca's latest job interview. My celebration completely forgotten the moment I left the room. That night, I drove home in complete silence and pulled up my banking app, calculating exactly how much money I'd given them over 7 years. Mortgage payments, car repairs, utility bills, emergency loans that were never repaid, credit card payments, insurance deductibles, even groceries. $67,000 of my money just gone into the black hole of their financial incompetence. That's when it hit me. I wasn't their son and brother. I was their personal bailout fund with a family connection. Time to see how funny they thought their little joke was when their bank went permanently out of service. The next morning, I called in sick and spent the entire day planning. I approach problems the same way on job sites. Identify the vulnerabilities, map the dependencies, then execute a clean disconnection. First call, my financial advisor. Moved every account they'd ever seen to institutions they didn't even know existed. Second call, real estate attorney in Denver about property purchases. Third call, my boss about permanent relocation opportunities. But the most important call was to Peter. Peter's been my best friend since college. When I told him about the dinner, he didn't waste time with emotional processing. Dude, he said, you've been their personal ATM for years, and they're treating you like the janitor. Time to shut down the money train. Then he did something that reminded me why he's the only family that actually matters. Without me asking, he took 3 vacation days off work to help me start moving my stuff to storage. Just showed up Tuesday morning with his pickup truck and said, "Where's this couch going?" While Peter helped me box up my life, I started testing their reactions. Missed Mom's birthday dinner because of a major electrical emergency. Let Rebecca's increasingly frantic voicemails about rent money pile up unheard. Skipped Sunday family dinner because I was swamped with crew management responsibilities. Their reactions were immediate and completely predictable. Mom sent passive-aggressive texts about family obligations and how disappointed she was. Dad called asking if I was going through some kind of phase. Rebecca actually showed up at my house at 9 p.m. demanding to know why I was acting all weird and distant. I'm not acting weird, I told her through the screen door I deliberately didn't unlock. I'm just busy with work stuff. Since when? You never have anything better to do anyway. That comment stung because it was absolutely true. I'd been so busy being their emergency financial response team that I'd never built an actual life. Week 3 of my little experiment, I forgot to pay their electric bill. Tuesday morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Dad, furious. Chase, what the heck is going on? The power company shut us off, and your mother can't find our checkbook anywhere. Oh man, sorry. The new position has been absolutely insane. Can you guys handle it this month? Long pause. We can't. Business has been really slow lately. We don't have $400. What about Rebecca? She got that new job, right? Rebecca doesn't have that kind of money. You know how tight things are for her. I hung up and immediately transferred $400 to restore their electricity. Not because I felt guilty, but because I needed them to believe this was temporary. But I was already 20 moves ahead. The house in Denver was perfect. 1,200 miles from anyone who thought they had unlimited access to my bank account. Peter helped me move the important stuff while my family was at my nephew's soccer game. We cleared out everything valuable in one afternoon. Are you absolutely sure about going nuclear? Peter asked as we loaded the last box. They made it crystal clear that my only value is financial. So let's run an experiment. See how much they actually give a darn about me when the money stops flowing. Peter grinned. This is going to be absolutely beautiful to watch. Monday morning, I submitted my transfer request to Denver. 3 weeks' notice, all my projects transitioned professionally. But I didn't mention to my family that I was relocating to another state. I wanted to see exactly how long it would take them to notice their personal ATM had physically left the building. The first month was like having front row seats to the slowest train wreck in history, all played out through social media. I didn't block them completely. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I just stopped existing in their world. No responses, no explanations, no forwarding address. Rebecca's Instagram became a real-time documentary of financial collapse disguised as lifestyle content. Started with the usual club photos and living my best life nonsense. Then gradually shifted to increasingly desperate posts about why is adulting so hard and anyone know good places for quick loans, and cash at me for good karma. The girl was practically live streaming her downward spiral. Mom's Facebook slowly evolved into weird guilt trips about family members who forget to call their mothers, and sharing those boomer memes about ungrateful children. Real, subtle manipulation tactics. But Dad's voicemails were pure comedy gold. I saved every single one. Message 1. Chase, call me back. Need to discuss the mortgage payment situation. Message 7. Son, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but we need to talk. Message 15. Chase, your mother's worried sick. Are you having some kind of breakdown? Message 28. I called your company today. They said you put in for a transfer to Denver? What the heck is going on? The desperation escalated fast after that. Mom called my old gym asking if I'd been acting strange. Dad contacted what he thought was my landlord, except I'd owned my house for 3 years, which shows exactly how much attention they'd paid to my actual life. Rebecca somehow got my HR department's direct line and tried convincing them I was having a severe mental health crisis. None of their amateur detective work accomplished anything because I'd covered my tracks like the professional tradesman I actually am. Mail forwarded to a P.O. box in Denver. Phone number ported to a completely different carrier. Car registration transferred to Colorado. Bank accounts moved to credit unions they'd never heard of. Meanwhile, back in their rapidly collapsing reality, bills kept arriving with no Chase to automatically handle them. Week 6, Peter called me laughing. Dude, your dad just showed up at my construction site. Full hard hat and safety vest, the whole deal. You're kidding me. Dead serious. Marched right up to my foreman asking if he knew where you were. Said it was a family emergency. What did you tell him? That you were fine, and maybe he should try treating you like a son, instead of a bank account if he wanted you to stick around. He turned bright red and started yelling about disrespectful punks who don't understand family obligations. I bet he thinks you're lying about knowing where I am. Oh, he definitely thinks I'm lying. But here's the beautiful part. Before he stormed off, he asked if I could help the family out with a loan for their mortgage payment. $2,000. Just asked me straight up like I owed him money. I choked on my coffee. He asked you for money? With a straight face, I told him I'm not open for charity. That night, I got my first direct contact in 2 months. Text from mom at 11:47 p.m. Chase, I don't know where you are or what we did to upset you, but please come home. Your father's stress is affecting his heart. Rebecca lost her apartment and had to move back in with us with Tyler. We can't manage all this without your help. Please just call and let us know you're safe. I stared at that message for over an hour. Part of me wanted to cave and fix everything like I always had. But then I remembered the laughter at my promotion dinner. The casual way Dad had dismissed my entire existence as a punchline. 7 years of being treated like hired help instead of family. I didn't respond. 3 days later, Peter sent me an update. I kid you not, they hired a private investigator. Game time. The private investigator thing should have worried me, but honestly, it was hilarious. These people who'd spent years not giving a single care about my personal life suddenly thought I was important enough for professional manhunting services. Peter kept me updated on the circus back home. Apparently, they'd hired some discount Magnum PI wannabe who charged them $1,200 up front and then spent 2 weeks asking the same neighbors the same questions. Real dangerous. The best part? Rebecca tried filing an actual missing persons report. Walked into the police station with printed Facebook posts and text screenshots demanding they issue an APB for her mentally unstable brother who'd abandoned his family responsibilities. According to Peter's source, his cousin Works Dispatch, the officer basically laughed her out of the building when she admitted I was 31, owned property, held a stable job, and that our last contact was me acting weird by not immediately returning phone calls. 3 months into my vanishing act, something happened that I genuinely didn't see coming. I was grabbing my usual morning coffee when someone called my name from across the shop. Chase? Chase Hoffman? I turned around and there was my cousin Lisa, looking uncomfortable as heck. I hadn't seen her in probably 5 years, but she'd always been decent people. Never treated me like a walking bank account. Lisa? What the heck are you doing in Denver? She approached my table like she was walking through a minefield. Can we talk privately? There's some really messed up stuff happening back home that you need to know about. We grabbed a corner table and she laid out the complete disaster. Dad's business had finally imploded spectacularly. Mom had to take a second job bagging groceries at night. Rebecca was living in their basement with her kid, working at some soul-crushing call center. But here's the thing that made me drive out here, Lisa said, pulling out her phone. They're not just struggling. They're actively trashing your reputation. She showed me screenshots that made my blood pressure spike. Facebook posts painting me as the selfish villain who turned his back on family when they needed him most. Text message threads where Rebecca called me mentally unstable and probably dangerous. Group chat conversations about how I'd always been weird. They're telling everyone you had some kind of psychotic break, she explained. Your dad's claiming you're probably on drugs. Your mom's spinning some story about you having a mental health crisis. Rebecca's been telling people you threatened her the last time you saw her. I never threatened anyone. I know, but she's got half the family convinced you're some kind of ticking time bomb. She pulled out an envelope thick enough to use as a doorstop. This is from your parents. But Chase, I didn't come here to deliver their message. I came because I wanted you to know what they're really saying about you behind your back. The envelope contained exactly what Lisa had warned me about. A complete character assassination disguised as family concern. Photos pulled from my social media that they claimed showed signs of isolation and depression. A detailed timeline of my concerning behavior that painted everything from missing mom's birthday to not answering phone calls as evidence of mental instability. But the last page was the real kick in the gut. A letter from some strip mall lawyer named Clark, threatening legal action for financial abandonment of dependents and willful neglect of established family obligations. They were actually planning to sue me for refusing to be their ATM. I called Peter immediately. They're threatening to take me to court for not paying their bills. Are you serious? Dead serious. Got some ambulance chaser to write up threats about abandoning my legal obligation to provide financial support to family members. Peter was quiet for a minute. He was thinking. When Peter thinks, bad things usually happen to people who deserve it. Chase, you can't play defense here. These people are never going to leave you alone unless you make it so expensive and painful to mess with you that they'd rather eat glass than bother you again. He was absolutely right. They weren't going to let me go quietly into my new life. They were escalating. Time to remind them what happens when you mess with the patient guy. Their lawyer was exactly what you'd expect from people who get their legal advice from daytime TV commercials. Some strip mall ambulance chaser named Clark, whose office was sandwiched between a check-cashing place and a place that sold spinning rims. His threat letter was 4 pages of complete legal nonsense about implied family contracts and established patterns of financial dependency, basically arguing that because I'd helped them financially for years, I was now legally required to keep paying their bills forever, like some kind of indentured servitude based on shared genetics. My response was to retain Catherine Walsh from the biggest, meanest corporate law firm in Denver. She charged more per hour than my dad made in a good week, but this wasn't about money anymore. This was about making sure they never, ever tried this kind of legal terrorism again. Catherine took one look at their pathetic threat and actually started laughing. This is hands down the most ridiculous legal document I've encountered in 23 years of practice, she said. But she also understood the real game being played here. They don't expect to win in court, she explained. This is pure harassment designed to force you back into contact. The lawsuit threat is just an excuse to drag you into settlement negotiations, where they can guilt trip you into resuming payments. So we did something they definitely didn't expect. We took their joke lawsuit completely seriously and responded with overwhelming legal force. Catherine filed a countersuit that was beautiful in its ruthless efficiency. Harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, fraudulent misrepresentation, and abuse of legal process. We documented every single text message, voicemail, email, and social media post where they'd painted me as mentally unstable. But the real masterpiece was our financial forensic analysis. Catherine's team built a complete accounting of every dollar I'd transferred to them over 7 years. The final tally was even worse than I'd calculated. $73,000. $73,000 of my money, documented down to the penny. Here's our plan, Catherine explained. They want to claim your financial support created some kind of legal obligation. Perfect. We'll treat that as an admission that they received substantial financial benefits under false pretenses. Then we'll demand full repayment with 7 years of compound interest. The legal jujitsu was absolutely perfect. If my helping them financially created binding obligations, then they owed me $73,000 plus interest for breach of contract. If it didn't create legal obligations, then their lawsuit was frivolous harassment and they owed me for legal fees and emotional distress. Either way, they were screwed. We served them on a Tuesday morning at Dad's business address. Peter happened to be driving by and saw Dad standing in the parking lot holding our legal papers with his face the exact color of a fire engine. Less than 6 hours later, my phone rang. Mom's number. For the first time in 4 months, I answered. Chase, what is this legal stuff? Why are lawyers calling us? Because you hired a lawyer to threaten me with a nonsense lawsuit, Mom. So I decided to respond with a real lawsuit. We weren't actually going to. We just wanted you to call us back. So you threatened to sue me? We didn't know what else to do. You won't answer calls or texts. We were scared. Scared I might not pay your bills anymore? Long pause. I could hear Dad shouting something in the background about ungrateful and lawyers. Come home, she said finally. We'll work this out as a family. We're not a family anymore, Mom. We're a financial services company and 3 customers who got upset when the bank relocated. I hung up, but the good part was just beginning. Catherine had included comprehensive discovery requests in our countersuit. We wanted their complete financial records, all communications about me, bank statements, tax returns, everything. 2 weeks later, their strip mall lawyer withdrew from the case. Probably realized he was about to get professionally sanctioned for filing frivolous nonsense. That's when Rebecca called me. sobbing like someone had died. Chase, you have to stop this legal war. Dad's having chest pains from the stress. Mom can't sleep at night. We can't afford real lawyers like you can. Maybe you should have considered that before you decided to weaponize the court system against me. We just wanted our brother back. Your brother? You mean the guy who paid your bills for 7 years and kept his mouth shut about being treated like garbage? That version of me is gone permanently. What do you want from us? We'll do anything. We'll say anything. And that's when I realized they still didn't understand what was happening. They thought this was some negotiation. I want you to leave me alone forever. That's literally the only thing I want from any of you. But we're family. Families don't sue each other for refusing to be ATMs. More crying and begging, but I hung up and blocked her number. 4 days later, Dad hired a new lawyer, someone with an actual downtown office. They sent Catherine a settlement proposal. My family would drop their non-existent lawsuit if I agreed to return home for mediated family counseling. Catherine forwarded the offer with a note. They still think you're negotiating. She was absolutely right. They literally could not process the concept that I was finished with them permanently. This was a complete amputation. Catherine sent back our counter-settlement offer. They could pay $50,000, reduced from the $73,000 we were demanding, plus sign a legally binding agreement that they would never contact me again through any means. Complete no contact, permanently enforceable with financial penalties. Their response came back within 24 hours. Absolutely not. They'd rather go to actual court, risk losing everything, and pay massive legal fees than agree to leave me alone. This was never about family love or financial hardship or even the money itself. This was about control. Peter flew out to Denver for the weekend. We sat on my deck drinking and watching the sunset paint the Rocky Mountains purple and gold. You realize they're never going to quit voluntarily, right? He said. Yeah. So, what's the end game here? The end game is making it cost them real money every time they try to contact me. Right now, harassing me is free entertainment. I need to make it expensive enough that they can't afford to keep playing these games. Peter's grin was pure evil. Now you're speaking my language. Monday morning, I called Catherine with updated instructions. No more settlement offers. We were taking this nuclear and asking for everything. Full financial restitution, punitive damages, legal fees, court costs, and a permanent restraining order with criminal penalties for violations. Time to end this war. Court day was everything I'd hoped for and more. Their new lawyer looked like he'd gotten his suit from the same discount rack where he'd bought his confidence. The entire family came to watch their legal strategy collapse in real time. Dad wore his one good suit. Mom dressed in her "please feel sorry for me" outfit. Rebecca showed up dressed like she was applying for a job at a strip club. Their lawyer went first, spinning some pathetic sob story about a troubled young man who'd cruelly abandoned his loving family. When Catherine stood to present our case, she didn't waste a single second on feelings or family dynamics. She went directly for the legal throat. Your Honor, defendants are asking this court to believe that a 31-year-old homeowner with steady employment and no history of mental illness somehow became legally incompetent the exact moment he stopped funding their lifestyle. She laid out our financial evidence. 7 years of documented payments, every transaction categorized and cross-referenced. $73,000 in voluntary financial support over 7 years. When that support naturally ended, they hired private investigators, made false statements to law enforcement agencies, and attempted to weaponize this court system to force continued payments through legal intimidation. When she called me to testify, their lawyer tried desperately to paint me as mentally unstable, asked leading questions about my sudden relocation to Denver, my complete isolation from family, my abandonment of long-established responsibilities. I kept every answer short, factual, and professionally calm. But these are your parents and sister, their lawyer said, like he'd just delivered some kind of devastating cross-examination. Yes, they are. And at my promotion celebration, an event meant to honor my professional achievement, my father told a room full of people that if I died tomorrow, nobody would miss me personally. They'd just panic about who was going to pay their bills. I decided to test that hypothesis scientifically. When Catherine cross-examined Dad, the mask came off completely. Mr. Hoffman, you testified that your son had a moral duty to support the family financially. Can you cite any legal authority establishing this duty? It's not about legal authority. It's about family responsibility. It's about loyalty. And what specific support did the family provide in return for $73,000 in financial assistance? Dad started flailing around, talking about raising him right and providing a loving home. Mr. Hoffman, at your son's promotion celebration, did you tell the assembled family that if he disappeared, No one would miss him personally? That was just a joke. Rebecca's testimony was even more devastating. Catherine had screenshots of literally every social media post where she'd publicly trashed me. When asked to provide specific evidence of this alleged dangerous instability, she couldn't point to anything beyond, he stopped returning my calls and wouldn't give me money anymore. Ms. Hoffman, you claim your brother verbally threatened you during your final conversation. What exactly did he say? He said he was tired of being treated like an ATM machine. And you interpreted that as a physical threat, how exactly? It was his tone when he said it. Right. Great job, Rebecca. The judge took exactly 14 minutes to deliberate. She dismissed their claims with prejudice, awarded me full damages plus legal fees totaling $89,000, and issued a comprehensive 2-year restraining order prohibiting any form of contact. Outside the courthouse, Dad made one final desperate attempt. He approached me directly while their lawyer tried unsuccessfully to pull him away. Chase, this doesn't have to end like this. We can still work something out. Family to family. Man to man. You're right, Dad. It didn't have to end like this. You could have treated me like a son instead of a bank account with legs. But you made your choice when you decided my only value was financial. We can change. We can do better. I'm sure you can. With someone else. I walked away and didn't look back even once. 8 months of court-ordered silence followed. 8 months of actual peace where my phone didn't ring with financial emergencies. My email didn't fill up with guilt trips. And I could live my life without constantly worrying about the next family crisis. I started hiking every weekend in the Rockies. Learned to cook actual meals instead of surviving on takeout. Joined a recreational volleyball league. Even went on a few dates with women. For the first time since college, I was building an actual life instead of just funding other people's disasters. But deep down, I knew the peace wouldn't last forever. Restraining orders expire. Legal judgments become old news. And desperate people with no other options eventually get desperate enough to risk consequences. The call came from Peter on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing wiring diagrams for a new commercial project. Dude, you're not going to believe this stuff. What fresh nonsense now? Your dad showed up at my apartment complex last night, around 9 p.m., just standing by the mailboxes looking lost. I set down my coffee. The restraining order specifically doesn't mention you. That's exactly what he said. Claimed he needed me to be a go-between because the family was in full crisis mode and they desperately needed to communicate with you about urgent matters. Apparently, the final financial collapse had been even worse than I'd imagined. Dad's construction business hadn't just failed. It had imploded so catastrophically that he lost his contractor's license and what remained of his professional reputation. Mom got fired from the dental office for missing too many shifts. Rebecca's call center job lasted exactly 7 weeks before she got terminated. Peter continued. He actually asked me to lend them money. Not a small amount either. Told me since I'm your best friend, I should help out the family during their temporary difficulties. Please tell me you laughed directly in his face. Better than that. I told him I'd consider helping them out, then called you instead. That's when I realized exactly what was happening. The restraining order expires in exactly 4 months. They weren't reaching out because they'd learned to respect boundaries. They were positioning themselves for the moment they could legally resume their harassment campaign. Peter, I want you to do something that's probably going to sound crazy. I'm listening. Tell him you're willing to mediate a family meeting. You'll arrange neutral ground in Denver. Just talking, no lawyers or legal stuff. See if you can get them to drive out here for a face-to-face reconciliation. Are you sure about that? Sounds like you're asking for trouble. They think enough time has passed that I might be ready to forgive and forget. Let them think that. Tell them you can convince me to meet with them if they're willing to make the trip. Peter laughed. Oh man, this is going to be absolutely beautiful. 3 weeks of careful manipulation later, Peter texted me. Fish are in the barrel. They're driving out Saturday morning. They actually made the 1,200-mile drive in Dad's ancient pickup truck. Probably pooled their gas money, shared a single motel room, and lived on gas station food for 3 days. The level of desperation required to risk that kind of expense when they were supposedly broke told me everything I needed to know. Saturday afternoon, Peter arranged the meeting at a busy coffee shop in downtown Denver. I arrived early and positioned myself at a corner table where I could observe the entrance without being visible. They walked in looking like refugees from their own lives. Dad had lost significant weight. Mom looked exhausted in that bone-deep way that comes from months of unrelenting stress. Rebecca looked genuinely rough, like she'd been sleeping in cars and eating 1 meal a day. Peter waved them over to a table positioned perfectly near the large front windows. They sat down nervously, constantly scanning the coffee shop for any sign of their missing ATM. So where is he? Mom asked, clutching her purse like it contained the last $20 they owned. He's here, Peter said casually, then pointed directly across the shop at me. The expression on their faces was perfect. Confusion, desperate hope, then slowly growing understanding as I stood up and walked over to their table. Hello, I said, sitting down in the empty chair directly across from them. I hear you wanted to talk. Dad launched into his prepared speech immediately, like he'd been rehearsing it during the entire drive from heck. Son, we know things got completely out of hand. We made serious mistakes, said things we shouldn't have said, but at the end of the day, we're family, and family takes care of each other through the hard times. You drove 1,200 miles in a truck that's probably worth less than my monthly utilities to tell me that family takes care of family? We're in real trouble this time, Mom interjected, tears already starting to flow. We lost everything. The house, the business, our savings. Rebecca and Tyler are living in a one-bedroom apartment with us. Your father's health problems are getting worse without proper medical care. That sounds rough, I said like I was commenting on the weather. We need help, Rebecca said, leaning forward desperately. Just temporary assistance to get back on our feet. We've learned our lesson about taking you for granted. We understand now what you meant to this family. Do you really? Yes, Mom said quickly. We know we hurt you badly. We know we took advantage of your generosity. We're willing to do anything to make this right. I sat there for a long moment, watching them squirm. These were broken people, desperate people, people who'd finally learned the hard way, what it actually cost to burn bridges with the only person who'd kept them from living under a bridge themselves. What exactly are you offering to do differently this time? I asked. They exchanged glances like they'd prepared for this exact question during their poverty road trip. We'll pay you back, Dad said earnestly. Every single cent with interest. We'll sign legal contracts, make it completely official. Pay me back with what money? You just finished explaining that you've lost everything. We'll figure it out. Get jobs, sell what's left, whatever it takes to make this right. And while you're figuring it out, just help us get stabilized. First month's rent on a decent place, security deposits, maybe a small loan to get back on our feet. Nothing like the old days. We learned our lesson. I almost started laughing right there. Let me make sure I understand the proposal, I said slowly. You want me to give you money now so that you can eventually pay me back money that you already owe me from money I gave you years ago. Is that accurate enough? It's more complicated than that, Rebecca protested. We're family. We love you. You miss my bank account. That's not fair, and you know it, isn't it? Dad literally announced at my promotion dinner that if I disappeared, you'd just panic about who was going to pay your bills. Turns out he was 100% accurate. Dad tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I've been gone for over a year and a half. In that entire time, how many of you called just to see how I was doing? Not asking for money, not guilting me about family obligations, just checking if I was happy or healthy or alive? Silence. Right. Because you don't actually care about me as a human being. You care about what I can do for you financially. And now that every other option has been exhausted, you're back to see if the ATM is ready to start dispensing cash again. Chase, please, Mom said. I pulled back before she could make contact. I need to tell you something, and I want all three of you to listen very carefully, because this is the last conversation we're ever going to have. I looked each of them directly in the eye. I don't love you anymore. I don't miss you. I don't even think about you. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely happy. And that happiness started the day I cut you off. Rebecca started crying harder. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. Dad just stared at me, shocked. I stood up from the table. Drive safe getting home. I'm sure it's a long trip when you're running on fumes and false hope. Chase, wait, Mom called out standing. I'm begging you. We're desperate. We don't have anywhere else to turn. Too late. I walked out of that coffee shop and didn't look back once. Peter caught up with me in the parking lot. Damn, man, that was brutal. Are you feeling okay about it? Yeah, I said, and I meant it completely. I feel perfect. I haven't heard from them since that day, and I never will again. Some bridges aren't worth maintaining. Some family members aren't worth keeping. And for the first time in my life, that feels exactly like freedom.